TorahCafe.com.
My name is Dovid Vigler. I live with my wife and children, Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, originally from Johannesburg, South Africa. And one of the interesting things that we do in Palm Beach Gardens is we run a radio show, Shmooze Radio Show, where we're separating fact from fiction and Bubba Mises from the bottom line. Every Sunday morning, going into our 4th year next Sunday morning. So that's what we hope to do here this afternoon as well. When my wife and I had our first baby, as if it wasn't traumatic enough 5 years ago, for the bliss of marriage to be disturbed by the wailing cries of an infant, my hair stood on end the most when my mother-in-law met my baby daughter Musia for the first time. What my mother-in-law said absolutely scared the daylights out of me. What she decided to call my daughter was a miaskite. A miaskite. Do you know what a miaskite is? I did not know what a miaskite was until that moment. A miaskite in Yiddish means an abomination. Something absolutely disgusting is called a miaskite. Why on earth was my mother-in-law calling her first grandchild a miaskite, an abomination? I was shocked. Coming from a home where my mother has garlic hanging on the kitchen wall with little red strings coming out of it for the past 30 years, I should have known better. We've all heard the poo-poo-poos that people say when speaking of their own good fortune. And we've all heard that unintelligible suffix that people add at the end of a phrase speaking of good fortune. I'm so glad that I bought this big giant house. And you wonder, what did they just say? She has 5 beautiful children. What they're really saying is in Yiddish, Kein ein hara, which means, may there be no evil eye. Kein ein hara. You say it really fast, becomes unintelligible. Whenever you speak about good fortune, people say, Kein ein hara. In America here, in Palm Beach at least, it's become one word, Kenahara. What it means is, let there be no evil eye. The story is told of the elderly Jewish gentleman who at 94 years old was called to testify at the witness stand. As he comes up to the witness stand, he's sworn in, and the prosecutor asks him his name, to which he says, Moshe Cohen. He then asks him his age, and he says, Kenai Nahara, 94 years old. The prosecutor says, what? Kenai Nahara, 94 years old. The prosecutor is absolutely mystified. All that he had asked for was the poor man's age. He says, I'm going to ask you one more time. Maybe you didn't hear the question. How old are you, sir? Kenai Nahara, 94 years old. Eventually the judge says, allow me. Kenai Nahara, how old are you, sir? 94 years old. The concept of the evil eye has permeated across borders, geographical, philosophical, cultural, and religious. Not only amongst the Jewish people are we superstitious about the evil eye, but even amongst the secular cultures. In Italian, they speak of malocchio. Malocchio is the bad eye, the evil eye. You may have noticed those ships sailing at sea from yesteryear with giant eyes painted upon the prows of the ships. Those eyes are there to scare off the evil eye from the very superstitious sailors as they go dangerously out to sea. Out in Africa, in what is known as the white man's grave, many white explorers managed to survive because of the evil eye. When the black tribes found these very strange-looking white people, they actually accepted them in, being afraid that they might harm them with the powers of the evil eye, because even in darkest Africa, they also believed in the evil eye. But enough about the secular culture. Here we are at the National Jewish Retreat to talk about what the Torah has to say about it. And as we said before, when it comes to the evil eye, like we do every Sunday morning, we're here to separate fact from fiction and Baba Mises from the bottom line. Please put your hand up if you think the evil eye is a Baba Mise. Okay, how about put your hand up if you think that the evil eye is real? Okay, that leaves about 95% of us undecided. And that's great, because that's what we're going to explore here today, about what it's all about. The Torah is replete with references all about the evil eye. You remember the great revelation at Sinai 3,327 odd years ago? It happened twice, remember? We first got the 10 Commandments. They broke. And we got another set of 10 Commandments. What happened? The Talmud tells us that the first set of 10 Commandments was revealed in too much fanfare. They saw the sounds. They heard the visions. Even Hollywood can't do that yet. It was so amazing. It was so exciting that the evil eye caused the first revelation at Sinai to come to a dismal end, which it did. Evil eye seems to work. Remember the two wives of Abraham? He first married Sarah. They were childless. They couldn't have kids. He then married Hagar, the Egyptian princess. Two women married to the same man in Jewish law has a special name. Do you know what they are called in relation to each other? The word is tsaris. You know what tsaris are? If you think you have tsaris, this is real tsaris. When you have another woman married to the same husband as you, that's real problems. So Sarah and Hagar didn't really hit it off like a house on fire. And when Hagar became pregnant, guess what? Sarah inflicted the evil eye upon her, and she lost her baby. Yosef, the favored son of his father Jacob, of all the 12 tribes, is blessed by his father upon his deathbed. Ben Porat Yosef, Ben Porat Alei Ayin. The son, the fruitful son, Joseph, the fruitful son who overcomes the eye. The blessing given to Joseph in his last will and testament by his father Jacob was that forevermore, from henceforth on, Joseph and his descendants would never ever be susceptible to the power of Ayin Hara, of the evil eye. That means the other 11 tribes, all the rest of us, we've got to be here today and find out how we deal with this. You may have noticed that one of the big challenges of running a shul is who to give the aliyahs to when you call people up to the Torah. You've always got to make sure that you don't call up two brothers or a father and son in succession. What's the reason? You guessed it. It's the evil eye. You call up two brothers or a father and son, one after the other, then people start thinking that these guys are taking over the place. And they get jealous. And they inflict this evil eye upon them. To avoid that, we do not call them up in succession. When you have a bar mitzvah, a family simcha going on, you've got to make sure that there's always a brother-in-law or somebody in the middle separating between them. This is also the reason why we don't name two brothers or sisters with the same exact name. You know, in America we have John Jr., John Sr. We don't do that as Jewish people. Reason is because it draws attention, it draws people's jealousy, it draws the evil eye. You also may have noticed the very strange way, the very peculiar way that we Jews count. For the geniuses that we are in finance and accounting, you'd think that we would have mastered the art of counting. Yet, when you walk into a shul, what happens? Pandemonium strikes. You're trying to count 10 men for a minyan. And nobody can work it out. They go, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, or they're counting shoes and dividing it by 2, they're counting yarmulkes. What's going on over here? What are we doing? Why don't you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? Once again, counting Jews causes the evil eye to descend upon them. King Saul knew this. And that's why when King Saul counted his soldiers, he had each one of them give a shard of clay, a shard of pottery. And later on, when they ran out of pottery, they gave a little goat. And instead of counting people, they counted pottery or goats. King David, however, Saul's son-in-law, forgot this law. He indeed counted his soldiers, resulting in the catastrophic death of 70,000 men in King David's camp as a result of the plague caused by the evil eye. Every single morning in the blessings that we say before our prayers, in the morning blessings, we say, V'tatzileni milashon hara u'me'ayin hara. Save me from the evil tongue and from the evil eye. Clearly, friends, clearly. The evil eye, the ayin hara exists. What we need to uncover, to unearth this afternoon is what is it all about? How can we protect ourselves from it? In the Talmud too, fascinating stories, absolutely fascinating stories in the Talmud about the evil eye. Some of them I'll just share with you, just a couple quickly. Rabbi Yochanan was known as one of the most beautiful men who ever graced the face of this earth. The Talmud tells us in Baba Metzia that Rabbi Yochanan was so beautiful that he made it his business to sit at the gate of the woman's mikveh, so that the first thing that the woman would see upon exiting the mikveh after their menstrual cycle would be his face. We know, Kabbalistically, that the vision that a person sees has a profound impact upon them. The Romans knew this too, and that's why they tied the beautiful boys and girls that they took captive from Judea to their bedposts, so that at the time of copulation, they would see their beautiful faces and hopefully conceive children as beautiful as the Jewish slaves. Rabbi Yochanan did the same thing. He seated himself at the exit of the woman's mikveh so that the first thing a woman would see at the height of her ovulation, at the height of her fertility, would be the beautiful physical face of himself, as well as his good deeds, and hopefully conceive children that would be likewise. When Rabbi Yochanan was asked if he does not fear the evil eye by flaunting his physical beauty in such a manner, he said no, because I am a descendant of Joseph. Joseph, who was blessed with the blessing of V'yidgu larov bekerev haaretz, and may you be like fish upon the face of the earth. Is that a blessing? Fish? Do you want to be like fish? Fish have the unique quality that they're invisible to the human eye. They're underwater. That was the blessing given to Joseph, that the eye has no power over fish. So too, the eye has no power over Joseph, nor over his descendant Rabbi Yochanan, who so brazenly seated himself at the gates of the woman's mikveh. Incidentally, when the Talmud asks why Rabbi Yochanan was not listed in the top 4 most beautiful men who ever lived. There must have been a Forbes 4 list in the Talmud of the most beautiful men. The answer, fascinating, was because for whatever reason, he lacked the masculine trait of a beard. Interesting. Rabbi Zera was another colorful character of the Talmud who immigrated from Babylon to Israel. The study style in Babylon was very, very different to that in Israel. In Babylon, they were full of questions, asking a lot of questions back and forth in the Babylonian Talmud. In Israel, it was straightforward. Everything was clear. Absolute clarity reigns in the Jerusalem Talmud. When Rabbi Zera immigrated from Babylon to Israel, he wanted to make sure that his old methods of study wouldn't hinder his future style of study in Jerusalem. To that end, he fasted 100 fasts to merit the ability to forget the Babylonian style of study and to assimilate the Jerusalem style of study. He then fasted a second set of 100 fasts in order to pray for the welfare of the rabbi of the time, of Rabbi Elazar, because he was afraid that if Rabbi Elazar would pass, then he, Rabbi Zera, would have to take over the communal leadership of the Jewish community in Israel, and he would no longer be able to study Torah. He'd be burdened by the communal responsibilities. He then took on a third set of 100 fasts in order to be saved from the fires of purgatory, from the fires of Gehinnom. In order to make sure that he was up to date with the newest releases of fires in Gehinnom, every 30 days they release a new style of fire in Hebron, in Gehinnom, in purgatory. A little better than Apple that does once a year in June. In heaven, in purgatory, every 30 days they get a new fire. So every 30 days, Rabbi Zera would literally step into a fire, into a furnace, barefoot. And when he came out unscathed, he knew that just as he was protected from the fire below, this was a sign that he'd be protected from the fires of purgatory as well. And every 30 days, this is what he would do. He would climb into a fire. And as he came out unscathed, he knew that his 100 fasts were working. One day, he climbs into the fire, and shockingly, what happens? He gets burned. All confused and burned, he comes out. The Talmud tells us what happened was that an evil eye, an ayin hara, had been inflicted upon him by one of his colleagues. From that day on, they called him the little man with the burned feet. Zera means small. You may remember the holiday of Lag BaOmer, the famous holiday when we make bonfires and bows and arrows, the Kabbalistic yahrzeit of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, when hundreds of thousands of people descend upon his grave in the Mount of Meron in North Israel. In the middle of the summer, Lag BaOmer commemorates the day when the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva stopped passing in a mysterious plague. Once again, what caused that mysterious plague that killed 24,000 of the greatest minds of their generation? The Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, tells us that the reason, once again, was the evil eye. The Talmud in Chagiga tells us a very sad story. That as Jewish people, we are chosen, but at the same time, it is our lot to suffer. We have to suffer. And if somebody is Jewish and is not suffering, it's not a good sign in his lineage. Rava, the sage, the Talmudic sage Rava, was a very successful businessman. He had a lot of money. And his colleagues, the sages, confronted him and they said, "What is this business? How can you be a prosperous Jew and not have any worries?" They actually inflicted the evil eye upon him because he wasn't suffering. They didn't know that in secret he's got all sorts of taxes that he has to pay the king of Persia. But they inflicted the evil eye upon him to the point that he lost all of his possessions. They were completely taken away by King Shapur, the king of Persia. When an object is found, if you find a lost object, the Talmud tells us you have to protect it, right? How do you protect it? Certain objects need to be laid out, like a Persian carpet. If you leave it folded for too long, it's not good. You need to lay it out and let it air out every once in a while. But the Talmud says that you're only allowed to air it out if nobody's looking. If you have guests and you lay it out, then you're actually causing damage to that lost object, because the people seeing it, your guests, will more than likely inflict upon it the evil eye. Certain professions, the Talmud tells us, just don't have blessing. They won't prosper because certain professions, which are too physically obvious, are susceptible to the evil eye and they won't succeed. So clearly, with all of these stories from the Bible, from our Jewish holidays, from the Talmud, all over our Jewish tradition, we are replete with stories of the evil eye. But is it fact or fiction? Is it a Baba Maisa or the bottom line? Turns out that it very, very much is a real thing. It certainly is not voodoo. It is very, very real. The explanation on what the evil eye is, how it operates, is it some sort of a supernatural mechanism or something a lot simpler, is a beautiful and profoundly simple explanation. You see, it's called the evil eye. It's not called the evil eyes, right? You ever wondered about that? When we look at something, we look at it with two eyes. When do you look at something with one eye? Do you ever look at anything with one eye? If you go to a website, I think it's called oneeye.com, there are people who only have one eye. One of the most famous ones was General Moshe Dayan, who was traveling down the highway from Tel Aviv to Eilat in the south of Israel. Remember, he was a general with the one eye patch? He was going down the highway at 200 miles an hour when he was stopped by a police officer. The police officer was shocked to discover the identity of the traffic violator. He sees it's General Moshe Dayan himself. He says, "General, you're the man responsible for conquering the southern part of Israel. How can you, of all people, violate the traffic laws here?" Said the general to the officer, he says, "Look, you know I have only one eye. I can either look at the road or at the speedometer. You make up your mind." When you have only one eye, God forbid, there are certain real problems that you cannot deal with. You see, the gift of two eyes is that two eyes converge in one point. And what that allows for, two eyes converging in one point, is the ability to judge distance. You have three-dimensional vision when you're looking from 2 points at 1 point. What's it called? Stereopsis, thank you. However, when you're looking with one eye, you can only see one-dimensional. You cannot see any depth. You can't judge shadows and depth. You can't see any of that. Which is why the oneeye.com website tells us that within 20 feet, a one-eyed person is just like a two-eyed person. But outside of 20 feet is when the problems begin. Parallel parking is a big problem for people with one eye. You can't judge the distance of the cars. Golf is a major problem. Here in Florida, it is life-shattering, certainly in Palm Beach. Even things as simple as a handshake can be challenging to a person with one eye because they cannot judge the depth. And based upon this, one of the leaders of the Musar movement, the founder of the Musar movement was Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. His grandson was Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler, who was one of the leaders of the Jewish community in the early 1900s. Eventually, he became the Rosh Yeshiva of the famous Panovich Yeshiva in Bnei Brak in Israel. That's the yeshiva you may have seen with a giant golden ark at the front of the study hall. He died at a very young age, in his mid-50s, in 1953. In a book that his students wrote, Michtav me'Eliyahu, the letter from Eliyahu, Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler explains to us the beautiful and profoundly simple mechanism with which the evil eye operates. He says, when one person looks with one eye, you cannot see depth. When a person looks at his friend's prosperity, his fellow's wonderful job, happy wife, healthy children, with one eye, you don't see what lies beneath the surface. You don't realize that there are motives and reasons and blessings and all sorts of divine calculations which led to this particular prosperity. With one eye, you see only one-dimensional vision. You see only that which literally meets the eye. When a person is prosperous and another jealously views that person, if that person sees with only one eye, without any depth, he only sees the other's prosperity and his own shortage, he may or may not offer a prayer up to God and say, God, why him and not me? Why she and not us? It is merely, says Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler, grandson of the founder of the Musar movement, the essence of the evil eye is nothing more and nothing less than a prayer offered up to God. Why him and not me? Inspired by jealousy, propelled by prayer, the evil eye rises higher and higher in the heavenly realms like any prayer until it rests before the heavenly throne. Let the prayer of an ordinary person not be considered light in your eyes, says the Talmud, because God listens to all prayers. In fact, Adam nidon bechol yom uvechol sha'a, man is judged every single day and every single hour. When somebody offers a prayer against you, that inspires, that provokes a re-examination of your file up in heaven. Nobody wants to go through a re-examination of their prosperity, ever. We know that in tzaddik ba'aretz asher yaseh tov v'lo. There's no such thing as a righteous person in the world who can do only good and will not sin. Every one of us has shortfalls. Every one of us has problems. Every one of us has challenges. The Rebbe asked us to bless each other at random, just like the priests bless the people on the high holidays with the threefold blessing. The Rebbe asked all of us to bless each other, even common and ordinary people, because God listens to the voice, to the calls, to the prayers of ordinary, simple people. When somebody prays against you, against your prosperity, they have cast an evil eye against you. The cause is the flaunting of the subject. The medium is God's reevaluation. And the initiation was through the jealous onlooker. Nothing more, nothing less than simply a prayer. Does whispering about our prosperity help us? Does it help ward off the evil eye if we go poo, 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 poo when we speak about how many beautiful children we have? Or what a wonderful house we bought, poo, poo, poo? Absolutely not. Totally useless. Absolutely nothing. How do you stop the evil eye? Now that we've established that it exists, now that we've understood the simple mechanism with which the evil eye works, it's simply a prayer. How do we stop it? So poo 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 certainly makes absolutely no difference. It's just completely a baba maisa. A red string, nobody knows where that one comes from. Whispering whispering about one's good fortune only helps if the whispering causes nobody to hear it. But if somebody hears it, then that person might become jealous and provoked to cast an evil eye upon you. Something which surely does work is Kain Ein Hara. Kain Ein Hara, or as we said here in Palm Beach, Kenahara, one word. Kain Ein Hara means let there be no evil eye. I have a beautiful house. Let there be no evil eye. What you are doing is offering a counter prayer to any evil prayer that may have been initiated against you. Just like the morning blessings, V'tatzileni mi ayin hara, save me from the evil eye, every single morning we are offering this prayer at the beginning of the day. God Almighty, please save us, save me, from being the subject of the evil eye. If somebody offers a prayer against me, an evil prayer against me, one prayer that would provoke a reevaluation of my prosperity in heaven, then please God, do not listen to that evil prayer, to that jealous prayer. And my prayer may or may not overwhelm the jealous prayer against me. And that is the meaning of the Kain Hara. In my research, I spoke to my grandfather, Rabbi Yehuda Krinsky, who was the Rebbe's secretary. And indeed, the Rebbe was known to have said Kain Ein Hara as well. The Rebbe has been quoted in saying, it's printed in some of his writings, particularly in the previous Rebbe's writings. He writes about Kain Ein Hara. So certainly something which comes out of the Rebbe's mouth, or the previous Rebbe's mouth, is certainly for real. And the Rebbe when speaking of prosperity, had asked God in that prayer to ward off any evil eye. A little bit like Harry Potter. Remember Harry Potter? Where you had those bad things, the death things that came in. And there was that Patronus that he would throw out, the counter positive energy that would repel the negative energy. The evil eye already started. So having established the background, we've decided that it's no longer a Baba Maisa. It's no longer fiction. This is a fact. This is the bottom line. It exists. Rabbi Leo Dessler tells us this is no voodoo energy that some people have the power to deal with. It's not some sort of a witchcraft. It's not some sort of voodoo. This is real prayer. Prayer is a gift that has been entrusted into the hands of every single human being that walks upon the face of this earth. How can you repel it? When the Rebbe addressed this question, when the Rebbe was asked, if the evil eye exists, the Rebbe's answer was sometimes. Sometimes the evil eye exists, and sometimes the evil eye does not. Sometimes you have to worry about it, and sometimes you don't. Clearly, the Rebbe is not trying to say that there's no such thing as the evil eye. Of course it exists. What the Rebbe is trying to say, I humbly offer to explain, is that the power of the evil eye to penetrate our prosperity, to affect us, our vulnerability to the power of the evil eye, that is what depends. Surely it exists. But if it has power over me or not, is my choice. The Rebbe says that it only is something you need to worry about if you believe in its power. But if you choose to not believe in its power, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. Allow me to explain. Hasidic philosophy explains that as Jewish people, we've been granted the gift of being able to initiate, to choose our relationship with God. The most famous prayer of the high holiday is Avinu Malkeinu, translates as, anybody? Our Father, our King. Avinu Malkeinu is our Father, our King. We have the choice of relating to God as a father as a son relates to his father, or as a servant relates to his master. A servant relating to his king. It's either Avinu or it's Malkeinu. On Rosh Hashanah, every time we blow the shofar, we say, Im kebanim, im ka'avodim, whether our relationship with you is like a son, or whether our relationship with you is like a servant. God, please have mercy upon us. What's the difference between a servant and a son? The difference is obvious. A son is given all that he gets, not because he deserves it, but out of love. Because mommy and daddy want to give it to him. You're my child. But a servant, on the other hand, has to earn his salary. A servant has to earn his pay. A servant has to earn his reward. Remember what the evil eye was? It was a prayer that somebody offered out of jealousy. Why is she and not me? Why are they prosperous and not me? Why are they healthy and not us? Which prompts that re-examination of your file up in heaven. When do you need to be afraid of a re-evaluation of your file, of your merits, of what you deserve? You only have to be afraid of what you deserve if you earned it in the first place. If your relationship with God is one of a servant relating to a master, a servant relating to a king. But if my relationship with my Father in heaven is as a son to a father, as a daughter to her mother, am I afraid that somebody's going to go to my father and say that David doesn't deserve dinner tonight because he was a naughty boy? Of course not. Your son doesn't deserve you to allow him to seek shelter in your home because he's not doing well in school? Of course not. The child doesn't earn the blessings that he gets from his parents. He just gets them because you're the son. If our relationship with God is the same, if we relate to God in a relationship which is not tit for tat, one for one, what you give is what you get, but we give God everything and we expect nothing in return. It's our choice. Do we relate to God in heaven as a servant to a king, earning every reward that he gets? Or do we relate to God in heaven as a child to a parent, receiving everything undeserved? This, I believe, is the explanation of the Rebbe's very unique approach to the evil eye. Unprecedented by anybody before his time. The Rebbe says that the evil eye only has power over you only if you believe in its power. The power of the evil eye is a heavenly re-examination, a divine re-examination of whether you truly deserve the bounty that you have, the goodness, the joy, the prosperity, and the happiness that you have. Only if you believe that a re-examination over you can change your fortune, if your relationship is tit for tat, a servant to a master, only then should you really be afraid of the evil eye. But if your relationship is like a child to a parent, you have nothing at all to fear from somebody, from your father re-examining your file, because father will always take care of his child. Mother will always feed her children. She'll never withhold clothing, shelter, food, love, warmth in a healthy parent-child relationship. Only if you believe in its power does it have any power over you. But if you don't believe in its power, the evil eye has absolutely no control over you. Give an example of a father-son relationship, okay? Remember Joseph, who was blessed with the blessing of being immune to the evil eye? That's quite a vaccine he got there, which lasted a couple thousand years, still running. Why did Joseph merit to be immune from the evil eye? Take a look at this. Remember the story of Joseph? This guy was the only son of his mother, of Rachel, for many years. His mother died at a very young age. He was sold by his siblings who had attempted siblicide. siblicide. They tried to kill their own brother. When they realized that that wasn't such a great idea, they decided to rather throw him into a pit full of snakes and scorpions, and they sell him off into slavery. This Joseph really was down in the dumps. He landed up as a slave in the house of a woman who tried to seduce him. She then framed him, landing him in jail for 12 years. Hated by his brothers, mourned by his father, hated by his master and mistress, rotting in a jail in a pit in the middle of nowhere. Joseph could have been excused for being a little bit upset with God. But instead, what does the Torah tell us? Vayehi ish matzliach, and he was a successful man. Everything he touched literally turned to gold. Instead of complaining, Joseph didn't say, I am the son of Jacob and I deserve better. He didn't say, Rachel was my mother, she was the favorite wife of Jacob, and this shouldn't have happened to me. He didn't say to God that my grandfather was Isaac and my great-grandfather was Abraham. He didn't say that, is this God what you do to the chosen people? He didn't complain one single word. He gave it his absolute best, because that is what a son does to a father. A son knows that the father always will be there for the child, and that's why Joseph was unfazed by any of the tragedies that happened to him. He accepted them all with love, because that's how a child responds to a father. Perhaps this is why he earned the blessings of Ben Porat Ali Ayin, that he was immune from any of the curses of the eye. Remember Rabbi Zera, who jumped into the oven every 30 days because he wanted to be saved from the fires of Gehinnom, of purgatory? Well, the Rebbe explains to us elsewhere that Rabbi Zera wasn't just physically a small man, but the name Zera was expressive of his spiritual standing as well. He was physically small and spiritually immature as well. Of course, we're talking about a great Talmudic sage. So compared to us, that's an absolute giant. But compared to his peers, compared to Rabbah, for example, who was great, Rabbi Zera was the small man, and perhaps that's why he was susceptible to the evil eye that was cast upon him by his colleague, and when he got his feet burned in the fire, because he was of small faith. He was spiritually immature. He was like a servant to the master, not like a child to his father. Same exact thing with the students of Rabbi Akiva that we spoke of earlier. The 24,000 students that the Jerusalem Talmud tells us were affected by the evil eye. They too were spiritually immature because they were unable to adequately respect one another. The inability to respect one another, the Rebbe tells us in today's Hayom Yom, is related to the inability to respect God. Therefore, the students of Rabbi Akiva, who were unable to respect their fellow Jews, also had an immature, spiritually immature relationship with God, not like a son to a father, but like a servant to a master. And this is why the Rebbe says that the evil eye, the ayin hara, only has power over you only if you're afraid of a re-examination in heaven. But if you are not afraid of a re-examination in heaven, if you're not afraid of somebody's jealous prayer against you, you have absolutely nothing to fear. The last question I want to leave you with is that some of us aren't sons to a father. Some of us do relate to God like servants to a master. Some of us do feel that we have to earn our way, and everything with God is tit for tat. We do a mitzvah, God has to give us a reward. We learn a little Torah, God has to give us a little reward. And we all know secretly in our hearts that when you do a little sin on the side, it's okay if God sends a little bad thing your way, right? Maybe we are a little bit like a servant to a master. If we are afraid of the evil eye, then how should you deal with it? The Talmud tells us again a beautiful solution. The Talmud in Eruvin tells us that if somebody has an unexpected windfall, if you find a lot of money that you don't deserve, you didn't work for it. Let's say you just won $1 million or $100 million in the lottery. what should you do to protect yourself from the evil eye? Everybody knows about it. Everybody knows that you didn't even work for it. A lot of people are going to be jealous about you, and why did he get the winning lottery ticket and not me? There's a very simple solution. So you're afraid of a re-examination in heaven? Here's what you do, the Talmud says. Associate your prosperity with a mitzvah, like buying a Torah scroll or buying a pair of tefillin. Say you earned $100 million in the lottery. You spend $30,000 on a Torah scroll. You spend $500 on a pair of tefillin. What you've now done is utilized the windfall to fund, to create an infinite mitzvah. Is there any limit to the reward of Torah? Is there any limit to the reward of tefillin? This is God's divine wish. It's the mitzvah commanded from heaven. When you associate your financial, physical prosperity with a mitzvah that has no limit, when there will be that heavenly re-examination of whether or not you deserve your prosperity, it will be found that you do truly deserve. Because the Torah scroll, the tefillin, has replenished, auto-replenished all of your merits. Because there's no limit to the success, to the blessings, to the merits that the Torah can send your way. Allow me to conclude with a story. A middle-aged man once burst into the office of Rabbi Isaac of Vitebsk. One Friday afternoon, not too long before Shabbos. He burst into the office of the great rabbi, and he said, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak of Vitebsk, Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac of Vitebsk, I need you to adjudicate a court case right now. So he says, right now? It's just before Shabbos. How about we wait till next week? So he says, no. I'm a melamed. I'm a Torah teacher. I work all week, every single day of the week. The only time I have a little bit of free time is on Friday afternoons when my students are off. Well, how can we have a court case if the litigant, if the other person is not here? So he says, the other person is here. Okay. So who's the other person, says the rabbi. The person I'm taking to court is the Almighty himself. God Almighty himself, and he's here. Obviously he's here. Understanding the sincerity, the gravity, the rabbi says, okay. Takes him into his office. And he says, since you are here, and since obviously God is here, I'll ask you, the prosecutor, to stand up and state your claim. What's your problem? So he says, well, my wife and I were blessed with a beautiful daughter. And over the past couple decades, she's grown. She's blossomed to marriageable age. And I have not a kopek in my pocket to provide a dowry for my daughter. This is the way of marriage. You have to provide a dowry. Without a dowry, nobody's going to look at you. Since there are not 2 but 3 partners in the birth of a child, the mother, the father, and God Almighty, my wife and I have done everything we can to provide for our daughter's needs. But God has not provided his part. We take him to court here today, this Friday afternoon, to demand that he place his share in the marriage of our daughter by providing her with an ample dowry. Quite an accusation he had there. So Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac then asks for the defendant to state his case. He was silent. He didn't say anything. Silence is admission of guilt. The rabbi ruled in a Jewish court of law that God has lost the case, and God therefore has to provide for the needs of the young lady of marriageable age. And with that, the man, the melamed, left the rabbi's office, looking forward to a wonderful Shabbos. On his way home, he finds his wife glowing from ear to ear. He comes home, she's glowing from ear to ear. Why are you so happy, he asks his wife. So he says, well, just minutes ago, moments ago. We just received all the money that we need to marry off our daughter. What happened, he asks. Well, she says, while you were out, a nobleman and his wife came by in their carriage. They were looking for me because the wife, the noblewoman, was convinced that she has been cursed with the evil eye. And she was advised that the only person who can solve her problems, who can redeem her from these curses of the evil eye, was the Melamed's wife. That's me. So she came over here. She asked me to cure her evil eye. So I did whatever she wanted. And then she asked me how much she should pay me. So I said, well, I need 5,000 ruble. So she put it on the table, and here we are. We got it. The moral of the story, this beautiful story, is that we do have a Father in heaven. God has given us the gift to be able to choose how we wish to relate to Him. Should we wish to be spiritually mature and relate to Him like an employee to an employer, like a slave to a master, like a subject to a king? The choice is ours. We can also choose to relate to Him like a child to a parent, like a daughter to a mother or a son to his father, knowing, trusting, having perfect faith and unflinching trust that God will surely provide. Throughout our history, we have always prevailed. We have always survived. If we can only gather the courage of our convictions, if we can only put together the strength of character to overcome the fears of the moment and to be able to relate to God as a Father in heaven, He surely will provide for all of our needs, protecting us from any forces, from any powers that seek to harm us, and blessing us with the blessing that the Rebbe would always conclude his Farbrengens with simcha v'tuv levav, with joy and gladness of heart, uv'toiv hanira ve'anigle, in good that is revealed and that is obvious. Thank you.